So today we're going to take a look at color mixing in Adobe Illustrator. One of the things that we're going to be doing is we're going to fill in this whole big chart right here. Um, and we're going to be hand mixing all of our colors. So I wanted to show you what your end file will look like, and then we'll actually build the file together through this demo. So right now we've got all of our hues listed right here. And so we've added a couple of extra ones just to give us some more flexibility. So we have a magenta and then adding a cyan right here. So we'll talk about kind of how we're going to create and hand mix each one of those hues. We have our tints adding white. We have our shades adding black. We have our complementary colors, what happens when you mix one into the other, which gives you a more nuanced range of colors. And then we also have our grayscale values, which is important for us to think about. We have saturation scales, and then we also have our secondary, our tertiary, and our complementary pairs placed right here. I'm going to go through and I'm going to talk about each one of your instructions. So we're going to walk through the entire thing. But I wanted to go ahead and preview what it looks like. Now this will be a little bit time consuming, but it'll be worth it in the long run because you're going to be creating all of these colors. And we're actually going to be organizing all of them. You can see all of our hues are actually listed right there, and our tints and our shades. And what's going to be really great is you can pull these libraries into your documents for your project, so you don't have to continue to hand mix your colors. So this is a document that I think you'll pull from quite a bit as you're working with your project. So this is the filled out version, and this is what every one of you is going to download from Canvas. And I'm going to walk you through each one of these steps. The first thing that I want to do, and actually right here, it'll say your name, and none of you should fill it in with it saying your name. We're going to select it. And we're going to type in our name. So none of you should turn in a document that says your name. It should all have your name written right there. So you'll notice that all my blocks are empty and I'm going to fill them. You'll notice I do have a big range of colors that are pre-filled from Illustrator. You can either see them in the swatches. So I can go up to Window and go down to Swatches and click that on. Or I can also see all of them listed right here under my control panel. If your control panel doesn't show up, you can also go to Window and say turn control on and off. So right now, if yours looks like this and you're like, oh no, where are my swatches? I can just go right here and turn on control and you should be good. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I put my name on there. So none of you should turn in a document that says your name. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to kind of step by step go through how we're going to work with each one of these. The very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to delete all of the pre-made swatches. And the reason that we do this is because Illustrator has a very kind of generic set of colors that loads. And it's kind of a tell for students that are first working in Illustrator. If you do a project with kind of all of the quote unquote Illustrator colors, that's very obvious that you don't have a lot of skill or nuance in terms of mixing your own colors. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the very first swatch. I want everyone to hold down shift and we're going to go down, and you can either do it over here and hold down shift or you can do it over here. So a lot of these things we can do in two places. So I have all of my swatches selected. I'm going to leave my no fill color and then also my registration. Those are two things you don't really need to worry about. And I'm going to hit delete, and it's like, oh no, do you really want to delete all those swatches? And I say, yes, yes, I do for my project. So you'll notice here now, if I click on my box, it might be filled with white, but it should be filled with a no fill color, and you'll notice that there are no swatches. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create my own swatch. So one of the things that we have to think about is kind of like, how do we make our own colors? And we can do that in a couple of different ways. We can hand mix things, and you'll notice if I kind of step back a little bit, and let's go back to the pre-made ones. Oh, we'll get there. There we go. If we go back to our pre-made ones, they're mixed in a really specific way. So we want to make sure that we're mixing these in a way that's going to make sense for, having a lot of different changes that we're going to be making to our documents. I'm going to delete these, and I'll say yes. And you'll notice it left the red one. We'll delete that one too. Let's go ahead and leave our black one because we need at least one swatch to work off of. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create my first swatch. So if I go here, I'm going to, each one of these boxes I can click and select, I'm going to fill with a color. So that's simply what we're going to be doing throughout our project. So I'm going to select my first box and I'm going to say new swatch. And our new swatch is going to start with magenta. So make sure you write that down. So your first swatch is going to be 100% magenta. One thing I suggest that's a little bit of a pain, make sure right here, see where it says add to my library, click that off. That will bring up a new box that will kind of continuously open over and over again, and it gets a little bit annoying. So if you don't want to see that, click add, turn off, click add to my library. That's a Creative Cloud thing. It'll save it within your document. We'll talk at some different other ways that we can save things. All right, so my first swatch is made. So I've got pure magenta. And what's really helpful is I can look over here and it's actually telling me how it's mixing that color. Now, when we go to our swatches and we say new swatch, there's a couple things that we need to set. You don't need to worry about a process or a spot color. Go ahead and leave it on process color. In your color mode, the default initially might be an RGB, and we don't want to be mixing RGB values because we actually want to be able to mix shades, which we'll need to add black to. So we're going to be mixing in something called CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, and then K stands for black. So now you can see how we can add black to our range of colors that we're going to be working with. So my first color that I mixed was pure magenta. So just sliding that over, saying okay, having that as its new fill color. And I'll say okay. And then the way that I found this to work most easily is I'm going to click the next box. I'm going to fill that with the same swatch, and then I'm going to mix my color off of that. So I'm going to double click. And now the next color that I want to mix is a red. I don't necessarily need to go all the way over to yellow. Does everyone see how that makes kind of a yellow red? I don't really want a yellow red or yellow orange. I actually want to just make kind of a pure red without too much magenta in it and not too much yellow. So I'm going to go, and sometimes I slide it around like that's way too much magenta. I'm going to go right about here and I'll say okay. Oops. And you'll notice I accidentally did something. So I accidentally changed the one that I had filled before. So I'm going to go back and make that magenta. And now this is my red. And I'm looking at my red swatch and that has way too much yellow in it. So I'm going to come back a little bit. So I'm going to take some of the yellow out. So the way that you add your colors is this is taking that color out and this is adding that color in. So I'm actually going to go back and I can preview it, which will be really helpful. And I'm going to make it a little bit more red. And we'll go about there. And I'll say, okay, that looks good. So we have magenta, we have red, and then the next color that we're going to mix is red orange. So I'm going to go ahead and fill it with that red that I just mixed. I'm going to go down to the bottom and click new swatch. And now I want to make a red orange. So now I'm going to go way far over. Your percentages might be different than mine, so don't follow mine exactly. Do what your eye says. Um, and let's see, I don't want to quite go to orange yet. That's a pretty good red orange. I'm going to see what my orange ends up looking like. So I'll say okay. And then I'll go to my next box. And once again, I'll click the last color that I mixed and I'll double click it. And now I want to mix a pretty good orange. So I'm going to go, I want somewhere in between a red orange and a yellow orange. So if I go one way too far, the other way too far, I can click preview and I'll say okay. And oops, hold on, I made a mistake. There we go. I should have said new swatch. I want a new swatch. All right, now here we go. All right. And I'll say, okay, all right. So that looks like a pretty good in-between orange. The next color that I'm gonna make is I'm gonna go down and say new swatch. And now I wanna make a yellow orange. And I'll say, okay. So you should have nice even steps between each color change. So I have magenta, red, red, orange, orange, yellow, orange. I might want to push these two a little bit farther. I might want to adjust my orange. And then our next color is going to be our yellow. So I'm going to go down here, say new swatch. And I'm going to take magenta all the way out. And I'm going to say I want a yellow. And I'll say, okay. So now you can see the difference between like this yellow and my yellow orange. I probably want to bring this back. So I'm going to go back and select that swatch. I'm going to double click. And I actually need to add some more. I need to take some magenta out. So I'm going to go this way with it. And I'll say, and I can also preview it and say, ah, that looks a little bit better. So everyone see how those two are getting a little bit closer. Now, moving on the other side of my yellow, I am now going to be working towards my greens. So I'm going to fill that with that color, the yellow. And now I'm going to be working towards a yellow green. C is for cyan, so I'm going to be starting to add some cyan in. And I wanted good yellow, green. Greens are a little bit tricky, and I'll say, okay. And I'll go to the next one. The next one should be my green. And we want to make sure it doesn't start to tend towards a green blue, right? So I'll say okay. And then for my next one, I'm going to do my green blue. And we'll add more cyan, getting a little bit more. And we might start to take some yellow out to get a little bit closer to that green blue that I'm looking for. Okay, that looks pretty close. I might want to push these two a little bit farther apart, but we'll see in just a minute how that looks. The next color that we're going to fill in is going to be cyan. And I want to go ahead and take all of my yellow out, right? And I'll say okay. And then we're going to add one more color. So we're going to go cyan, and then next to that, we're going to do a blue. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to add a little bit of magenta in until I get a nice kind of rich blue, and I'll say okay. And then on the other side of my blue, I'm going to have my blue purple. I'll say new swatch, and now I'm going to start adding in my magenta. And I want to get a good kind of blue purple. And I'll say, okay. My next color is going to be purple. Of course, I might want to start taking a little bit of that cyan out. So I'm going to come back this way. And purple is another tricky one. You don't want it too warm or too cool. There's my purple. And then my last color that I'm going to mix is going to be a red purple. So I definitely want to add quite a bit more, take out a lot more cyan. And we'll say, okay. And there you've got it. You've got your range of hues. What's really helpful is you can see them listed and their values. So you've got all their values kind of listed right there, so you know what's happening with that. The other thing that's really helpful in Illustrator is we can make folders. So instead of having 50 million swatches, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Shift, and I'm going to go down to the bottom, and I'm going to select all those, and I'm going to say New Color Group. And I'm going to say, these are my hues. And I'll say, okay. And now it's in a folder. So now I can close that folder and I can make another set that we're going to be working with. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work with my tints. And so for my tints, you'll notice down here that are percentages for tints and shades. So I have a very specific range that you're going to be working with. So for your first tints, what we're going to do is we can pick any one of our hues that we want to. In the demo file, I had magenta. I'm going to pick cyan just to make it easy. And so for our first one, if we take a look at our swatch, you'll notice that cyan is at 100%. So our first swatch is going to be at 100%. We're going to go to our next swatch. And once again, we're going to go and we're going to say, oh, we need a new swatch. And now it's pretty simple. All I'm going to do is I'm going to change that to 95. And I'll say, okay. And then I'm going to go to my next swatch, and we're going to fill that with our 95 that we just worked with. And I'm going to make a new swatch. And so the next percentage, you'll see a bigger jump is going to be 80, and I'll say 80. Okay. Our next swatch that we're going to be working with, we'll fill that. We'll say new swatch. Instead of 80, we're now going to do 70, so on and so forth. So these will be a little bit more subtle as they kind of go through and they lessen. So we'll do 70, and I'm not going to do all of these, but we'll see what 60 looks like, so on and so forth. So you'll see kind of like the intensity of it is going to change. So we'll see what 50 looks like. And then all the way down. And just keep an eye out. There's a difference between 195 and then the 0 and the 5 right there. So make sure you don't skip those. So we're going to go through and we're going to add our tints in that way. And then we're also going to do the same thing with our shades. So I'm going to pick a color. Let's say I'm going to pick yellow. And I'm going to do the same thing. So the first one's going to be at 100%. I'm going to go to my next one. I'm going to say I want a new swatch, and now we're going to start adding black to it. So instead of adding 100% black, we're actually going to work backwards. So right now I'm going to add 5%, and we'll say okay. And you'll notice that immediately already starts to make a difference right there. Now we're going to do 10, so on and so forth. So we're going to work with our tints, we're going to work with our shades, and then the next thing that we're going to go ahead and take a look at is working with our complementary colors. I'm going to skip down actually to grayscale. Grayscale is going to work very similarly. We're going to fill it with a black on the first one. We'll go next, and actually that should be a pure black, so we're actually going to take all of this out and only have our black. So that's at 100%. We'll say okay. We'll go to our next one. We'll add a new swatch. Oops, hold on. Let me do it off of the right one. There we go. And now we'll do 95. And now we'll do 90. And what this is allowing you to see are the subtle nuances between the difference. Oops, I switched that one. Between what is the difference between a percentage? What is the difference between 95% of something versus 100% of something? Sometimes when we're working with swatches, we kind of like to pick like generic numbers, but actually we're finding that like more nuanced things are working a little bit better. So for grayscale, we're going to start to black and we're going to go all the way down, same way we did with our shades and tints. The other thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be filling in this area over here. So over here, we've got our secondary colors. And so our secondary colors are, of course, our orange. And so if we go right here, here's our orange that we created. So we'll go here and we'll fill that one with orange. Our other secondary color is going to be our green. And our third secondary color is going to be our purple. And so you can see the intensity of those kind of lined up. Our tertiary colors are going to be our red orange and our yellow orange. And some of these you'll be able to take a look at and say, ooh, I need to push that a little bit farther. That's not quite where I want it to be. The other tertiary colors are going to be our yellow green, our green blue, and then our purples. And so then our blue purple and our red purple. So you'll fill that in. And then down here you'll have your complementary pairs. So here we'll have our true red that we did. So we'll do our true red. We'll have our green. Here we'll have our purple and our orange. And this just gets you really comfortable knowing what these color relationships are. So when I say complementary pairs, when I say tertiary, you know immediately what I'm talking about. And then we'll do our last one, which will be our yellow and our blue. There we go. So we got our complementary pairs, our secondary pairs, our tertiary pairs. So I'm going to go ahead and save. I'm going to take a quick break, and then in the next video, we're going to talk about how to mix your complementary colors and then also your saturation scales.